Hi, so I'm just sitting here with Bob Greer, who you can see on the other side of the screen there. Hi, Bob.
Hi.
So we are just going to talk through the astonishing occurrence of me searching the world for literally the leading experts in the latest water science and finding myself talking to a New Zealander. The,
Yes, a great coincidence. The
that's
whole
where I
business is a
started.
yes. It's coincidentally I was researching the technology that was presented by some products from the United States, um, and trying to back engineer the technology when I stumbled on Gerald Pollack at the University of Washington, who had only just discovered or only just written a book about the science which explained the technology. The technology had been around for many years and a lot of people had talked about it, but none of them could ever explain it properly.
Yeah.
So I was in the unique position of having both the technology and the science together.
So, but you had the technology first and it was working.
Yes.
And it was working based on, how did you develop it? Obviously, common sense that water is life and the structure of water is crucial to the quality of water.
Yes, so basically that would be our initial assumption, yes. And the knowledge that somebody else had done this and seen some results which were pretty amazing, which were in many instances not believed. But the moment we actually introduced technology into New Zealand and we started to research the first time that it had been used here, we discovered that it did work.
Yeah.
And that the people who had the opportunity to take that technology forward chose not to.
Yeah, and I mean that's the resounding success really, is because you can have the science and the tests and the hypothesis of understanding the structure of water and how crucial water is to everything on Earth and keeping our entire life cycle running, but it's an entirely different stage to have the commercial technology and be implementing that in our agriculture industry right now to immense success from the profiles I've read of what you're doing.
Yes. The problem has been that I suspect the knowledge, or the understanding, I should say, because they're not the same. The understanding is frightening because all the books have to be rewritten.
Well, I mean, to me, I understand why there's the resistance. It's not about rewriting books. It's about changing the entire pharmaceutical industry, because if we can heal by remedying the frequency, then all the rules change, And I did research on this 10 years ago. I did a big a development profile for a future kind of healing mode in a gym, a major gym chain in Europe, and there appeared to me to be frequency technologies around from the 70s, really, which could measure your frequency and help to change your frequency of the human body in order to heal. So,
Yes.
Swinging that back round now, I realize over all that time, I think a lot of the technology relevant to frequency and healing, which is really the frequency of water because we are mainly water, has been buried or hard to get off the ground.
It's easy and quite successfully possible to blame, investment in other things. Yes.
You can't get investment into this sort of technology very easily.
Now, what I'm saying is that there are too many with investments in other areas which are going to be adversely affected by the outcomes of this.
Too much competition, obstructing it.
Yes, that's an easy answer, but I think that there is probably a deeper answer than that, and that is fear. fear that what I thought I knew is no longer valid, that I've been working my life on a lie.
Well, just a simplistic understanding, surely. You know,
Mm.
but I think to most people it's common sense that the structure of water or the purity of water, that there's high quality water and low quality water. You know, half the hospital beds in the world are filled by people who are sick from contaminated water. 80% of the world's illnesses is from water-related diseases, poor quality water. So we know that there is good quality water and poor quality water, and poor quality water leads to sickness. Now, you know, so let's start by going to the detail of your technology, what it actually does. You actually have an instrument that you can place in the water which restructures the water.
Yes, we do it using electromagnetic waves. And there are a number of ways in which you can stimulate water to change its characteristics.
Yeah.
In nature, this is done in a number of ways. So there is a natural occurrence of this. Water seems to want to morph into another phase or state. It happily changes to solid by lowering its temperature.
Right.
It also changes to a vapor if you raise its temperature. We've all known since we learned anything that water has three phases: solid, liquid, and vapor.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we didn't know that there was a fourth one. And that fourth phase is the key to it. That is the secret that has been revealed by Gerald Pollack. The fourth phase of water is the phase of water which does all the work for our metabolism. It is the source of life. The fourth phase of water is a crystal phase. It's a liquid crystal. The water forms in a way in which the molecules are joined together to carry energy, and the energy is electrical energy, that it becomes a conduit for electrical energy when it's in its fourth phase. And your body is full of the fourth phase of water. 99% of the molecules in your body are water molecules because of their small size.
Yeah.
And they're there for the purpose of transporting that energy. And that energy is then provided to the engines of your metabolism, your cells. And so life is created by water. And
I know, right? But for me, that's so obvious. And I mean, I even spent time, because I've done legal cases to help defend the rainforest, or attempt to, not too easy, but and worked with Indigenous chiefs, and you know, their entire understanding or effective spiritual religion is based on water. Water is life. Water is sacred. Water is the essence.
It sounds very spiritual, but in actual fact, it is very simply the truth. It's fundamental.
Yeah.
Once you understand that water has this ability to morph from one phase to another, and even seems to desire that, you start to understand how nature works. And once you've got that understanding, then the whole of life becomes much more easily perceivable.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, because it was, even going back to the frequency of the body, it appeared that every state of health was at a level of frequency, and when the frequency dropped, you went through different stages of sickness. And it was arguable that if you could identify when your frequency dropped to a certain level of megahertz, then if you dropped any lower, you were going to get sick, whether it be the common cold down to as sick as cancer. And so you had a way to manage your health, literally by identifying your frequency.
Yes, but the medical profession don't want to know anything about that.
That's because it doesn't make them any money.
That's correct.
Okay, so Can we talk about your use of this instrument? Like, for example, you sent me earlier today a profile of a farm that you'd used this on, and the effect, like the detoxing it had on the cattle, and then how beautiful, shiny, and healthy the animals were, the cost efficiency, all of that. Can you kind of talk us through that profile? Because that was an amazing profile.
Yes. That profile was a good one from start to finish. So it's an example, a very good example, but it's not the only one. We've had that kind of reaction and that result repeatedly, but that particular one, everything went right. So it has become our key example. There, what we got was the opportunity to change a farm from top to bottom, because the owner was convinced that the outcome would work.
Yeah.
He was no fear. And so
he was a believer.
Yes.
I think that makes a difference in this technology.
Yes, it certainly does. So we treated first of all, his major problem was that the children in the school a quarter of a mile down the road couldn't play in the playground for the smell that came from the effluent pond at the farm.
Wow.
You could smell the smell when you drove through the village a quarter of a mile from the farm. You could smell the smell wafting into the village.
Yeah.
And so my first opportunity was to try and deal with that. So I suggested that we treat the effluent pond first. And so we put a device in the effluent pond to introduce electrons into the water and to change the charge in the water, to change the water structure. And that had an immediate effect. 2 days later, the smell was gone. So then we got the opportunity to do the washdown water and the drinking water in the dairy shed. So I put a device in each of those big tanks, and immediately we did that. Smell in the dairy shed disappeared. The flies, which were a significant problem, they disappeared also. They didn't come back. And the cows, 2 or 3 days later, started to eject worms in their excrement. The owner of the farm became worried about that because they seemed to be in some distress. And I said to him, we've seen this before. It appears to be a detox. Just hold off for a couple of days and see what happens. And in a couple of days' time, they improved and their skins went silky and their health improved significantly.
Which is an amazing consideration, really, that you can detox through clean, pure, crystal-structured water.
Yes. Absolutely, yes.
So you don't just require food. I sound like I'm a nutritionist, so I'm not at all. This is totally about water, but it's just obviously water has a key relationship with food.
The bandwidth of this link has been varying a wee bit, and we've had a wee bit of jitter there. But basically, I don't believe that the digestion in the cow is much different from the digestion in the sewage pond. We eliminated the smell because we eliminated the anaerobic bacteria in the pond. I believe we did the same thing in the rumen and the cows as well.
Okay, so to talk about that, the difference between the effect of the crystallized, restructured water on the cow's health versus the ability to restructure the water itself to be safe for consumption.
Yes.
Your technology, and then the difference between water in an effluent pond, which is a controlled area, or water in a lake, or water in a river and stream.
Right. The water, when it's confined, has the opportunity to change or morph without the influence of motion or renewal or the arrival of water which hasn't been exposed to the treatment. So a lake or a pond is probably a good opportunity to change its character. Rivers are perhaps a little more difficult in so much that you're dealing with a moving liquid base and it's being renewed continually. So whatever effect you're going to have is going to be downstream, and you might have to increase the amount of input to be able to get a significant result. I have thought about our ability to treat such things as growths in rivers, which we've had a lot of, a bit topical with fishermen and so forth, but we have not done that experiment yet.
Yeah, because obviously I ask that with your awareness as well of the massive chemicals that have been dumped in our rivers, lakes and streams currently at government order. So Britificum, 1080 monofluoroacetate, literally the world's most lethal chemicals due to their acute rate of death. But also one of the things that, and obviously they're mass torturing animals and freshwater fish to death when they're dropped all across our rivers. But then they're leaving dead poison carcasses in the rivers, which contaminate the rivers even further and act like a sort of an increased tonnage of poison themselves, because the carcasses of the animals themselves become poisons, and then they're left in the river to partly decomposed because the maggots also die, so the ecosystem is broken. And so you've got this mass contamination of our living water ecosystem, which is obviously then flowing through into the farmers' livestock troughs. And that's why I was fascinated about your technology as well, because literally it's a way I realized that farmers right now could put this instrument in their troughs and restructure their water to be clean for the cows, even though the government is, directly and deliberately poisoning their fresh water.
One of the first responses we got from trialling farms, and these weren't necessarily just dairy farms, or these were sheep farms as well, was that the first thing the farmer noted was he didn't have to clean the dog's trough anymore. So the dog was getting the good water in his bowl.
Yeah.
And the microbes and so forth were not actually growing on the bowl itself. He didn't have to wash it out and clean it out anymore. That was the first response.
Saying that the clean, restructured water literally cleans the surfaces itself, or it doesn't. There's no residual waste or bacteria or anything coming on the surfaces.
It resists the growth of bacteria on the surfaces. Now, this is not new. This is, in actual fact, during my research, I found references to this going back to the Vikings. 1,000 years ago, the Vikings were using water that they gathered from the peat bogs, and they used the water for drinking water. It lasted them for weeks at sea, and they used it to preserve their food. They used to wash their food in it before preserving it to take with them. And so this is recorded in Scandinavia and in various other parts of Europe. They found devices made of wood secreted into the peat bogs, and couldn't understand what they were there for. But it subsequently discovered that they were there to channel the water from the moss, which is a hydrophilic surface.
So the moss is a hydrophilic surface, so that orders and structures the water to its crystal form. Absolutely. And then the water operates, instead of being in a glass of like in a glass where it's randomly, all the molecules are randomly bouncing around without structure. When it's on a natural surface, I say like a riverbed because it's relevant to the case that I'm working, but like the moss, it becomes ordered. It gets the information and the instruction from nature to become ordered and then provide its life force in a much stronger or, perpetual state.
That's correct. This is what Pollock found, was his discovery began with the change in the water molecules, or the change in the characteristics of the water after the water was passed over hydrophilic surfaces, where the water became charged. And that charge meant that the water could carry electrical charge to whatever it came into contact with.
Yeah.
And it had this ability to preserve whatever happened or remember. This is
we've got all these words. We've got memory, retains information, stores information. I like to say has an opinion, conscious, actually probably makes most of the decisions in the world, given that it, keeps everyone alive. I mean, it's really, when you start talking crystals, you start to think of the technology used in computers, don't you? Of really storing, crystals store the most information in the world, right?
Yes,
or is it gold?
Indeed.
Is it crystals or gold?
They do indeed. This connection to the Vikings, however, has another twist, which you may be interested in because it involves New Zealand.
Don't say. We had people in New Zealand during the Vikings' time?
In the 1860s, there was a great desire to transport fish over, trout over and salmon over to New Zealand for recreational fishing. And
wait. So trout and salmon were imported. They're not native species.
That's right.
So that's why the government's willing to poison them all to death, because they're trying to poison everything not native. So that's why they're poisoning all the rivers happily, because they're actually deliberately poisoning the trout and the salmon.
That could very well be the case. Anyway, what happened was that the acclimatisation societies that were established in New Zealand put up some funds, and a chap named Ewell spent some hundreds of pounds refitting ships to bring the trout over and salmon over to New Zealand. Unfortunately, the time at sea meant that this was not possible and the eggs didn't survive. So he attempted to do it by cooling them down with ice, and had 3 goes at doing it, all failures. He was then offered a meeting with somebody, a lunch meeting in Paris. He learned about the Vikings. And so he went back and he packed the fish out into sphagnum moss and ice chip. It was at sea for 87 days and arrived in Tasmania. 97% of the ova survived. Up until then, the best that they'd done was 3%.
Because it was structured.
Yes, the water was structured.
So you just changed
the water inside the eggs is structured.
Now, arguably, like I had this conversation with Gerald, like the riverbeds and the lakes and anything natural is a hydrophilic surface. So it's all structured, intelligent water that is the life force that runs into everything living. And it runs into the ocean, doesn't it? The rivers and streams run into the ocean.
Yes, and this is the process for renewal, of course. It runs into the ocean for evaporation, and therefore it is recharged and sent back to the ground via rain, and then the cycle continues.
What do you think of the science that says water regenerates and the earth generates water?
The earth generates water.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to have that explained in a little bit more detail to follow that, because it doesn't really click with me at the moment.
Yeah, well, I'd be interested because it's just something that I'm beginning to explore because there's a lot of sentiment around that that does happen. Although, because we're at this stage where we're only really just starting to discover the truth of water in a scientific sense, or as you've just explained, rediscover that what everyone, the ancients, and as I explained with the indigenous people in the rainforest, so the indigenous people in the rainforest to the Vikings knew the power and consciousness and structure or informational capacity of water. And yet, and a lot of Asian countries did as well, but yet we seem to be living in a society who thinks it's sort of almost equivalent to an innate object that just, you can put a toxic poison, the world's most lethal poisons in it, it'll dissolve, you can't see it anymore, or it metabolizes and thus it's gone. So
if we dye our hair and we strip our jeans of its threads to make them look good too, don't we?
True, there's something wrong with us. We're definitely not living in the age of intelligence, are we? Okay, so what we've sort of talked through so far is that you are obviously there's a huge problem with water contamination in farming right now, and what you've sort of explained, although it's more difficult to do or you need more charge to do it in rivers, you can purify the water at least in the controlled areas of water like the effluent ponds or the troughs.
Yes.
With this frequency technology, restructuring it through electromagnetic frequency, and lakes obviously because they're contained as well, and so you're able to equally use that on human water. And you were talking about an example that exists in Christchurch where there's a spa where it's used.
Oh, yes. During the earthquake in Christchurch, there was a phenomenon that occurred and appeared in the press. There was a queue of people stretching down a street to the corner beyond and around Colombo Street, which is the main street. And people wondered why all these people were queued up there with their containers. And so the photographer and the press reporter went and had a look, and they found that they were there to collect water from a pipe which had been put through a fence at the end of a blind road. And the people were collecting this water to take away because it was the only really good water that they could find in a damaged city. I went and had a look, and I also tried the water and was surprised by the quality of it, so I knew about it. Subsequently, with this change and the City Council applying this poison to the water to make it clean, which I fail to understand, the queues started to appear again, and here are these people with all their containers standing in a line waiting to fill them. Yeah. Because they knew instinctively that what they were getting was good for them.
Right.
It's not difficult for the human body to differentiate good water.
There was no test for it, but they could taste it, and they could. Well, do you know what? When you drink the pesticide water that we've got, the poisoned water that we've got, you immediately taste it. You feel the brain fog. You feel the kidney ache. You immediately suffer the consequence. Our water is so arguably toxified, and that's just by tasting and drinking it. You don't need to have a scientific test to know that something's wrong with our water right now.
Well, that's the human being or the animal. Any animal will display a great ability to distinguish between what it should ingest for hydration and what it shouldn't.
Yeah.
If you put 3 bowls on the ground and ask the dog to go and drink it, you'll find that he will go to the one with the spa water every time.
Right. And when you say spa, you're saying it. What do you mean by spa?
Well, a spa generally is water that emanates from the ground, and while it's been in the ground, it's generally under pressure, and it's also in motion. And these characteristics actually create structured water. So spa water is something that has been in existence for a long time and known to be healthy, but not why.
And yet, when water goes through the pipes, it breaks and it becomes more dead. So it's not just any sort of pressure and motion, it's specific pressure and motion in a natural environment.
That's true, yes. When water is confined in a city water system, it loses its energy and becomes dead.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's only really any use to stop you from drying out. It doesn't have any health influence.
Excuse my yawning. It's Sunday. I'm allowed to yawn on a Sunday. So your technology doesn't use the pressure and motion like a spa. It artificially creates that, or it technologically creates that through electromagnetic frequency through an instrument.
Yeah. There are a number of technologies that I have found. The one we're currently using electromagnetic waves, really mimics nature. Nature uses infrared waves to charge the water in your body. So if you were to go into a shower or a sauna, you will feel good. You'll feel good because the infrared energy is actually charging the water in your body and creating energy.
So should I buy like a infrared lamp and put it in my house?
Possibly so. Or my past experience with them, I felt them a wee bit uncomfortable. But I certainly get the effect.
Like you felt overcharged.
Yes, I think so.
Too much infrared. Like party all night.
I get a great. I get the result from my shower in the morning. Sometimes I wake and not feeling very energetic, but if I let the shower run down the hair in the back of my head, I immediately feel invigorated.
But okay, so so the infrared is recharging the energy of the water, but if the water is not, and the water in our body is arguably structured because we would be hydrophilic surfaces. However, due to the toxicity and the poisons, that is what's the word where you dehydrate? It's like dehydrating the cells of the water. So it's dehydrating the cells of the structured water so that your cells are dying because
when you talk about the difference in the water being one thing or the other, it's never quite one thing or the other. Right. It's always a proportion of this and a proportion of that. So what we're struggling for is to find the highest proportion of structured water in our bodies would give us the greatest feeling of health.
Right, and poison scientifically has been evidenced to deplete the structured water or like literally erase it from the cells and from the body. So the more poison you've got going in, the less structured water you've got there, so the less health you've got there. That's a pretty clear equation. And the second part of this is that. Well, okay, so you agree with it. We're on the same page there. The second part of this is the fact that we haven't touched on yet is the fact that the structured water stores the information for periods of time. And although tests haven't been done for thousands of years, you just did an example where the salmon and the trout lasted 87 days and 97%.
Survival rates.
Survival rate. So and that was just because they arrived at that point, so all was good and they went into normal fresh water. Perhaps with the structured water it could have lasted a lot longer. Certainly Gerald's tests indicate it can last many months, and so, but you've got there's other science that suggests, for example, of the monofluoroacetate poison that's been put in our New Zealand water right now, that farmers really need to look at cleaning out of their water, restructuring out of their water. That metabolizes into the fluorocitrate molecule, and it's in fact the fluorocitrate molecule, the metabolized degradation product, that is the poison. That is what kills.
You're talking about a Krebs cycle.
Yeah, it mimics the citrate molecule to interfere with the Krebs cycle. It kills the Krebs cycle, and so and this is something that you probably, farmers need to come to understand this more and more, because all of their water is being poisoned, and so the technology you're talking about restructures it. But in terms of the memory and the storage of information, the poison will be stored because the monofluorocitrate, the fluorocitrate molecule stays whole once it's metabolized for, some scientists have suggested potentially forever. There's no science to show when it's gone out of the system. It could be whole for 4 years. Now that's restructuring the water to the frequency of the poison for that entire time. But with your technology, you could come along and literally, like that, restructure it back to health.
What happens when the water is changed into the fourth state? It forms a matrix. So there's a molecule which is relatively well understood, but what isn't understood is that that molecule, in actual fact, joins with other molecules to create a matrix. And that matrix is a bit like a picket fence. So if you imagine you're riding along on your bicycle, you're trying to poke a stick into the picket fence, you find that you actually can't get it in because the picket fence has become quite solid since you're travelling along it. The matrix of the water is much like that. So any interfering molecule, any unwanted molecule, any molecule that does not meet the design of the matrix cannot enter. So it is ejected. When
your technology is working, that's what you mean.
Yes.
So when your technology is working, so you put your technology in and it starts reforming that matrix to order the molecules in the water, and it won't allow, so the fluorocitrate molecule itself remaining whole in the water as a degradation product of the metabolized poison, that won't be allowed into the restructured matrix. So what happens to it?
That is the what is the word for it? The $96,000 question.
That's still a mystery.
It is somewhat. I have a theory though.
So the structured water effectively kills it. It's like white blood cells versus red blood cells. It's like a war of molecules.
It is a war of molecules, and I think it's more simple than that. It simply destructs it.
Okay. I prefer the word kill.
It takes it to bits.
Okay, so it won't allow the killer fluorocitrate molecule back in. So for example, what I want to check here is that our government have just done a criminal act of spreading the world's most lethal toxic torture poisons, reproductive agents, through our waterways. Now that's flowing into troughs, for example, and the farmers can come along with this instrument, put it in there, and the fluorocitrate molecule that otherwise science has suggested might last 4 years in some temperatures, might last forever in others, would be so there's two things. There's the fluorocitrate molecule, and then there's all the water around it, which is restructured to a diluted frequency of that poison information. And so there's the molecule itself staying whole and all the water restructured to the frequency of the poison. Your instrument comes along, it restructures the poisoned information water, the frequency of the water to be the optimized crystal pure state once again, and through restructuring that, it basically exterminates the fluorocitrate molecule, which sits there as a absolute killer, loaded gun molecule of death, waiting to be consumed and trigger disease and the breakdown of death of cells and the breakdown of the body.
There's a lot of controversy about this because the laws of physics, as they're written, say that this is not possible.
Oh, but I mean,
However,
you sometimes wonder if we went from the dark ages to the dumb ages, like the power of control was once like, believe the Bible or you'll be killed, dark ages. And then we went to the dumb ages, which is just let's educate them all to be completely stupid and misunderstand life. So,
in 19, in
because
1960
oh,
in
sorry, go.
1967, in 1967, there was a French scientist who, in actual fact, took that to his science and showed that it was not true. But nobody.
Jacques Benveniste?
No. I just have a wee bit of trouble remembering it offhand. He was engaged by the French government as a looking at people's deaths, a coroner, because they couldn't explain a number of deaths from whatever causes, and he looked into it, and during that process he established that that the laws of physics were in actual fact wrong, and that the explanation for it was relatively simple, but unfortunately nobody wanted to believe what he found.
Well, at the end of the day, you've got to understand that, and we keep talking about animals and then we touched on human water, but at the end of the day, if you can go to all the livestock troughs tomorrow around the country and all the human water supplies, put that frequency tool into it, restructure that water to the purest form of ordered crystalline liquid fluid to support life and health in the optimized state, then you're going to start detoxing everyone's bodies by the sounds of it, and all the animals. So everyone's going to detox. That water itself is going to heal everyone, and then everyone's going to live in an optimized state. Now that definitely negates the desire of the current powers that be, which is the intent to poison everyone. But the beautiful is that it's the miracle. I was watching a terrible program of Bill Gates today talking about he's chasing the miracle, which is, depopulation by vaccinations. Like he literally explained that on a TED talk. He said we need to reduce level of carbon, and there's 4 things we need to reduce, and one of them is people. We need to reduce the number of people, and I'm doing that. He literally said, basically, I'm doing that currently by vaccinations, reproductive health, reproductive therapy, and health. It's like, wait, you just said that you're doing those 3 really positive sounding things in order to achieve a reduction of people. Like, you just admitted genocide, dude.
This has about the same.
Funny.
It has about the same benefit as poisoning the water to make it good.
I know. So what I love about this technology, even though I believe, and I know I'm very blunt, but I believe no one in their right mind could mass poison water, and knowing that, and everyone knows, I mean, you would never pour water into a glass and even leave it for a week and then still drink it thinking it was safe. You would never do it. No one in their right mind would do that. And yet they're pouring so much poison all over our bush, mass torture poisoning all of our wildlife. Everything lies dead where it lays, where it should be. Even the warning label says bury it 3 meters underground for safety. But so incredibly toxic, one of the most toxic substances in the world. Poison animals laying dead in our water. Of course, the mosquitoes come along, form stagnant pools. We're going to have... Do you know what I was thinking today when I was reading all the statistics of the destruction of health across the world? I was thinking we're going to be a third world country within a year. I mean, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean that in terms of the health statistics, because, there's going to be mosquitoes feeding off stagnant pools next to those dead, rotting animals of poison in our water, flying and injecting that into our bloodstream. We've already seen evidence of bees, feeding off the blood of toxically dead animals and pollinating that into our blood, into our food system. And obviously, it's going into our animals which we then eat. Well, I don't, but lots of people do. And but of course, then it's irrigated. It's irrigated across all of our plant-based food. And so all of this toxicity, we are literally going to it's a poison, so it kills the cells and mutates the cells to trigger all sorts of diseases and death. Now, back to what I love, which is the fact that your technology arguably could be rolled out en masse across the country if we had leadership that weren't psychopaths who actually wanted to heal the country. We could remediate the water. We could remediate the livestock water in the troughs. You could deploy that technology within, what, a month?
Well, on the scale of, as I said, I think earlier in some communication, that there are 10,000 irrigation, there are 10,000 treatment ponds in New Zealand which are on the verge of collapse.
Well, the problem is they want it to be on the verge of collapse because they're trying to collapse the dairy, beef and sheep industry right now.
Well, it could be the case. The thing is, there's no need for it because those 10,000 ponds could be fixed within 6 months.
Why 6 months?
That would take that long for us to get that number of electronic units manufactured.
Because the manufacturers can't step it up?
Yes, the manufacturing of it is not really a big issue, but I think it's the infrastructure to actually take it to the field and install it, which would take the time.
One of those waste of time government departments like DOC that just go around killing everything was closed down. You could arguably hire a whole lot more people to go out and actually remediate the water and fix the country, couldn't you?
Absolutely, yes.
So then you could just as easily put that frequency technology into the water reservoirs for the humans, and you would have the end of our health crisis.
Absolutely. I believe so.
So the only reason that any rational person wouldn't do this is because they want to poison the water. They want to kill the people, and they want to devastate and collapse the primary industry.
Well, they certainly don't want to fix it.
That was a very conservative answer, Bob. Okay, but I
have no great desire to be overly contentious.
Yes, okay, no, fair enough.
I have to consider that to further this technology commercially, I need to tread carefully in political directions. Yeah.
Well, the problem is you need a change of political climate because the current politicians want to run a poison program, want to collapse the ecosystem, and want to structurally reform the nation out of agriculture. So, and I mean, I also believe we need an agriculture system which is far more balanced, but the way to achieve that is not by criminal means, and that's certainly, the International Criminal Court are reviewing my case against them for spreading this massive poison. But the fact is that the solution to fix it is right there at our fingertips, and so. If you had the right intention for the country, which is to empower the people's health, empower the environment, we can undo the damage, what they've done, very, very quickly, can't we?
Yes, we can.
Sorry. Let me just check that this person's not downstairs. 1 second. Sorry. Hello. Ah, you are downstairs. Okay, 1 second. Bye. Lucky I answered. Should have been waiting down there forever. Okay. Can we do a part 2 on this?
Certainly we can.
Because we've kind of established that, it's not just the science that completely revolutionizes the understanding or the limited understanding of most people to think that water can be, toxically poisoned and that it's fine. Definitely it becomes a loaded gun of sterility, disease and death, and it needs remedying. And now that our country has been attacked all this year with tons and tons of poison, it's in desperate need of remedy because farmers' livestock will be getting sick. They need their water remediated, and people will be getting sick. They're already promoting an epidemic of pneumonia, and that's absolutely 1080 poisoning consequence, in a lot of cases, like Legionnaire's disease, which is a form of pneumonia that you die from. That's because it's poison.
Legionnaires.
I've
had Legionnaire's, so no.
Oh, are you sure it wasn't 1080 poisoning?
No, it came from the fertilizer in my glasshouse.
Ah, so it was another sort of, it was a fertilizer, it was a poison.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's amazing, because what you've just said there kind of helps my argument, which is that it is the poison that will cause Legionnaires' disease, because that's the effective symptoms that you're suffering. And so they're already pre-promoting that for New Zealanders. And so I've been really looking at what are the solutions that could stop that from happening if we had ethical leadership, if we had political leadership who wanted to optimize the health of the country and the primary industry. How could we remedy this? And definitely your technology changes the country and heals the damage that's just been done immediately, not without already consequence and suffering.
I think a bigger consequence is the actual fact of the cognizance of the water itself, and it's
say that again.
The cognizance of the value of water, will be raised to the point where people will better understand why it is they need to recognise it and why they need to mitigate. It's just the things that we're doing badly.
Water is life.
Water is life, and without it we'd all be dead, and we need to understand how critical it is to our good health, but we don't, because we haven't valued it.
We need to learn to value it again. Water is sacred, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, I should go and pick up my visitor downstairs, but it's been so lovely to talk through your technology, and it's invaluable. I hope to see it take off to a whole new level in New Zealand. Certainly with the poisoning that's just occurred, it's going to be needed.
Well, we live in Maruia for a reason.
I don't know where that is. I'm ashamed to admit. I thought it was some foreign island. When you said you were there, we were working out time zones to talk. I'm like, he must live in some island like near Mauritius or something.
The Maruia Declaration, if you look it up on Google, in 1973, there was a petition to Parliament to stop the Forest Service from cutting down the beech trees in the Maruia Valley for wood pulp.
So you declared your independence?
Sort of. It's the biggest. It's the biggest petition that's ever been created, and it caused the cessation of the Ministry of Forestry and the development and the establishment of the Department of Conservation. So it was a watershed.
Oh, that is so funny, because, I've got a referendum which I haven't promoted lately because I've been so busy on this case, and I was so viciously attacked by the media. Like Seven Sharp did this brutal takedown job of me, because it was the suggestion that we needed a second jurisdiction of the North Shore, create a jurisdiction like the centre of London or the centre of Washington or Monaco. So independence, but only by superficial boundary on paper, just to create a second jurisdiction so that we could appoint a second body corporate of the Reserve Bank under the Reserve Bank Act. So I've got two legal cases with the New Zealand courts where I argue that much, the judges try and ignore me doing it, but I do argue that. And because then we would have control of our currency, and we could afford the crash of admitting the poisoning that's happening and reconciling that a lot of our stock would be poisoned right now and a lot of our food is poisoned right now. But the beauty of so we need money to do that, and our current Reserve Bank body corporate restrict our money supply, so we can't finance ourselves through the destruction phase, the crisis phase. However, with your technology,
we mustn't give up
quickly.
We mustn't give up the people power thing, because the Maruia Declaration was the first event which really proved that a petition could change the country. Have a look at it and Google it, and you'll see. Yeah.
Okay.
And that was signed just a few hundred meters down the road from here.
Okay, so you're in the right spot. You're independent. I love it. Yeah. Okay, look, I have to run, otherwise my poor friend will sit there waiting unfairly. So I look forward to talking again soon.
Righto, cheers.
Thanks for taking the time. Cheers, Bob.